Hello again, my weary pupils. You have probably seen this photo circulating. It is vaguely viral of what appears to be just a bunch of British teenagers chill-maxing on their UK stairwell. And that's exactly what it is. But then you read the caption and learn this is the Turkish royal family. Now, when you think of images of the Ottoman Empire, you conjure visions like this, or this, or this, which is the stereotype that survives. But then we look at this, and it doesn't reinforce that stereotype. They don't look necessarily Turkish, at least not ceremoniously so, nor do they look particularly royal. So, how does this become this? Imagine the sun, that sun, our sun. Imagine the sun falling from the heavens and landing into a puddle outside Paddington Station. Instead of evaporating this city, or rather the entire planet, which it has every right to do, the sun decides the puddle is rather cozy. Dispel all logic with me for a moment. It shrinks itself down, puts on a tweed overcoat, and begins studying the underground's timetables. Maybe it even takes a liking to marmalade sandwiches, or God forbid, jellied eels. The sun learns to speak in a dialect of raindrops and soot. It begins to worry about the price of coal and the dampness in its knees. Eventually, the sun forgets it ever held the solar system together, and it thinks that it's actually just a rather bright and quite confused bit of mud. This is that story. It begins in the gold leaf palace of a 600-year-old empire, one of the greatest empires that ever stood. Hitches a ride in a midnight ambulance, hops aboard a British steamliner, and ends in a drafty flat in merry old England. This is how the Ottoman Empire became just a bunch of British teens. I am the professor, and you're in my dark academia. In this video, we will peel back the layers of mid-century or Victorian chimney soot to reveal a bittersweet portrait of survival and adaptation. Together, we will uncover an empire in disguise, exploring how the descendants of rulers who once held the hinges of the world surrendered the silken ceremony of Topkapı to master the quiet, mundane art of becoming an average British household. Before we cross that suburban threshold, if you enjoy this kind of archival deep dive, may I offer some extra credit? By subscribing to this channel and leaving a comment, you will transform your A into an A+ level. Also, check out the Patreon link in the description to unlock bonus content such as sneak previews, outtakes and bloopers, and members-only delisted videos. Plans start at only $1 a month. Now that the syllabus is sorted, let's continue with how one of the world's greatest dynasties avoided the fog of history by choosing to hide in plain sight. This is a history video on a history channel, so we need to begin where everything begins. In the beginning.
In the beginning.
To English speakers, it's the Ottoman Empire, but that word didn't come from a place or a people. It came from one man. It's a centuries-old transliteration of a single name, Osman, the Turkoman tribal leader who struck a spark in northwestern Anatolia in 1299 CE. Think about that for 1 second. An empire named after its greatest leader. That's like calling France Charlemagne, or Great Britain, dare I say, Alfredo. The name Ottoman specifically designated the followers of a single patriarch. It wasn't just a country, it was a 600-year family business. For 6 centuries, this single lineage served as the heartbeat of a transcontinental superpower. The story of the Ottoman Empire is the story of a minor Anatolian border state that grew to hold the hinges of the world. The seed, the itty walnut, was a modest principality. Picture a medieval Rhode Island. Through conquest and influence, this backwater podunk frontier kingdom rapidly expanded across other principalities, Asia Minor, the Middle East, across 3 separate continents, culminating with what was both the death and rebirth of the Byzantine Empire with Mehmed II's siege of Constantinople in 1453. As if Rhode Island had conquered all 50 United States, including Washington, D.C. itself. From its headquarters on the Bosphorus, the crossroads of Europe and Asia, the empire wielded immense geopolitical power, reaching its pinnacle as a global superpower in the 16th century under Suleiman the Magnificent, when its borders stretched from the Balkans in the north to the Indian Ocean in the south. The scale of this longevity is hard for the modern mind to grasp. Can you imagine a country that can claim having fought both the medieval Roman Empire and the Americans? These feel like totally separate ends of history. To us, they're different worlds, but for the House of Osman, it was all part of the same long story. They shattered the ancient world when they breached the millennial walls of the Byzantine Roman Imperials in 1453, extinguishing the last living remnant of the Roman Empire. By the time they were locked in the mechanized global slaughter of World War I, US destroyers were actively sitting in the Black Sea, watching the final pieces of the Ottoman world dissolve. Like, here is the Ottoman ambassador in Washington in 1913. That's when the meatball lady from The Wedding Singer was born. She died 2 years before I started this channel. The Ottoman Empire and Professor Dark Academia are separated by little more than a meatball. Rather than strict and rigid provincial might like that of Imperial Rome, the early Ottoman Empire maintained its grip through the traditional millet framework. This millet governance was the Ottomans' method of elevating religious leaders into imperial civil servants, creating a malleable indirect rule that granted both Muslim and non-Muslim communities the autonomy to manage their own courts, laws, and taxes appropriate for them. They were bound not by homogeneity, but through diversity. 500 years before Disney went woke, older histories paint a simple picture of a centuries-long decline following the failed Second Siege of Vienna in 1683, but that's if you stare at maps. Whole lifetimes existed in that period when Ottoman rule was stable, unmatched, and unchallenged. Modern scholars recognize the Ottoman state remained a resilient, adaptable economic superpower well into the 18th century. It was only as Western technological shifts and the contagious romance of post-French Revolution nationalism swept through the Balkans that the imperial authority began to fragment, prompting a 19th century wave of internal modernization known as the Tanzimat reforms that attempted to forge a cohesive modern Ottoman identity. The empire's twilight was dimming. The idealistic constitutionalism of the 1908 Young Turk Revolution yielded a radicalized nationalist military dictatorship. Not those Young Turks, these Young Turks. While the major European nations were fresh, locked, and loaded after a quiet, peaceful arms race, the Ottomans were profoundly exhausted, having lost Libya in a war against Italy and losing the Balkans in a war against the Balkans. These conflicts amputated about 83% of their European territory and 69% of their European population, losing 250,000 casualties, shattering the economy, and bankrupting the military. When World War I arrived, so did the driving nail for a collapse. By 1914, while Europe prepared to fight a rapid war of movement with advanced railroads, Ottoman soldiers were reporting for mobilization lacking even the most basic uniforms and boots. Ultimately, the war shattered the old imperial structure. Its outer territories were carved into League of Nations mandates, overseen by British and French colonial administrators, while Anatolia itself was sliced up by Allied occupying forces. Yet, out of the ashes of this partition, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk led a successful war of independence, militarily shattering the Allied plans, bringing a formal end to the 600-year-old Sultanate in 1922, and clearing a sovereign path for the modern Turkish Republic. The United States of medieval Rhode Island was back to being little old Rhode Island. It reminds me of that edited Simpsons memes where an Ottoman, the furniture, disappears into the shrubs and then reemerges as a roasted turkey. Ottoman turkey. Get it? While you can throw in empire, it's another thing entirely to dispose of an emperor. The British involvement with the exiled House of Osman was not an act of humanitarian sympathy, but a move in cold, calculated imperial chess. When Mustafa Kemal Ataturk's nationalist forces overran the Allied occupation and advanced on Istanbul in late 1922, the last ruling sultan, Mehmed VI Vaheddin, knew he faced a trial and likely an execution. On 16th November 1922, the Sultan sent a secret letter to General Charles Harrington, the commander of the British occupation forces, formally requesting political asylum and extraction from the city. The British and Allied forces in the area moved quick. At precisely 6 o'clock on the rainy morning next day of 17th November, Mehmed VI walked out from the side doors of the Yıldız Palace and into a British military ambulance, which secretly carried him away to a steamliner to begin what would be his permanent exile. 18 months later, a single piece of legislation, Law Number 431, turned 600 years of dynastic history into a single suitcase and a one-way ticket for all 155 high-ranking members of the imperial family. However, the British did not bring the Sultan to London. Doing so would have turned him into a political lightning rod. Instead, they dropped him off at the British colony of Malta before he eventually settled quietly in San Remo, Italy. The other 154 members scattered across Europe like ashes in the wind. The exile was accompanied by ruthless financial execution. By law, all non-state private properties belonging to the dynasty were liquidated. Under the watchful supervision of local police, the royal Osmanoğlus were forced to sell off or pledge their ancestral possessions at absurdly low opportunistic prices. All things must go: couches, chairs, refrigerators, and ottomans. Much of their remaining wealth was systematically looted or stolen by untrustworthy agents. Prince Ziauddin Effendi's mansion was blatantly stolen, and Sultan Vaheddin's properties were similarly liquidated by fraudulent middlemen who completely abandoned the family's interests. The newly formed legal system consistently rubber-stamped the state's seizures of these private assets, blocking every judicial claim the family attempted to make. The transition from gold-leaf imperial palaces to drafty flats in foreign lands was complete. The family entered exile completely destitute. The early decades were raw, horrific survival for the royal diaspora across Europe, and some fell entirely through the cracks of history. In one tragic case, Prince Ahmet Nureddin Effendi scratched a fraction of a living playing piano in public, and his brother, Prince Ahmet Nuri, who committed suicide in a public park in France. In his pocket, authorities found a heartbreaking final note that read, "I am dying of starvation. Do not blame anyone else." Meanwhile, Sedika Sultan, the 80-year-old granddaughter of Sultan Mahmud II and mother of Prince Sabahattin, was reduced to sleeping on cold park benches. The family who once commanded millions were now the shivering homeless of Western Europe. And yet, one resilient branch of this dynasty managed to carve a new life across the English Channel. Prince Osman Selahaddin Osmanlı, a direct descendant of Sultans Murad V and Mehmed V Rasad, settled in the United Kingdom after wandering years of exile in Egypt like Moses of old. In a striking shift of landscapes, he married a British woman of Greek lineage, Athena Joy Christophorides, and raised his family in the quiet green riverside towns of Henley-on-Thames and Marlow, Buckinghamshire. For the children of this British diaspora, identity became a complex journey. Aisha Osmanlı, born in Henley-on-Thames in 1971, was raised surrounded by old family photographs and treasured heirlooms, tangible remnants of an extraordinary past. In 1974, the last exile from male Turks was lifted, and the remaining royals and their descendants were allowed to conditionally return to Turkey. Aisha recalls her first visit to Istanbul at age 4, walking hand in hand with her beloved papa along the Bosphorus. When he looked out at the water and said, "This is our home," it created a profound core childhood memory. This moment of belonging was instantly shattered when a group of men recognized them, followed them, and began hurling insults and obscenities. The deep-seated hostility of the old world had not forgotten the wounds of history. This duality left her feeling like an outsider in both worlds, encountering prejudice from both Turks and foreigners. Yet her family's resilience inspired her to become a historian and author, writing works like The Gilded Cage on the Bosporus to present the Ottoman perspective, bringing their experiences out of the historical shadows and giving a voice to ancestors whose stories are too often rewritten by the quote-unquote victors. Today, the integration of the Osmanoğlu family into the fabric of Great Britain takes on forms that are both highly successful and deeply ironic. One of the family's most publicly recognized figures in the UK is the popular comedian Naz Osmanoğlu, a direct descendant of Sultan Mehmed V, who navigates British society with a public yet humble profile regarding his imperial lineage. If you ask me, this image is anything but humble, but he was a comedian. In an article with Business Insider, he lightheartedly recounts the time he had to purchase a ticket to visit his family's own palace that was turned into a tourist attraction. Despite the family's exiles lifted, the modern royals remained private citizens navigating a world of contrasts. Through all the vast injustices, the plundered estates, and the starvation of the elder statesmen, the family's loyalty to their homeland never wavered. Rarely would any of them speak ill of the Republic. While some of them remain British nationals who carry the weight of 6 centuries of family history in their surnames, they hold no power in their hands. The empire is no longer a map. It is a concluded volume safely shelved away, and, dare I say, gathering dust. The sun has long set on the Ottoman Empire and is feeling healthy and quite happy in its little English puddle. And for the heirs of the ultimate gatekeepers of East and West, both the elder statesmen who know nothing but a foreign life and these quintessentially British teenagers nibbling scones and sipping PG tips, the ultimate irony remains. When they wish to see the inner chambers where their grandfathers ruled, they must join the queue, reach into their pockets, pull out a quid, and buy a museum ticket to step inside their own family's home. If you like this video and all things royal history, a link will appear on the screen leading to a video about Prince Harry and his autobiography, Spare. Was his personal exile warranted or treasonous? I have been the professor. You're always welcome in my basement of the palace.